understand its standing before I come to a conclusion about it, how upset I should be. If we accept the recommendation that's presented here, are we implicitly accepting your recommendations as to how we should proceed with the subsidiary? For example, the question that was just asked, item 12 in this says that the project agreement does not expressly permit HBRC to nominate a subsidiary to take its place under the project agreement. So we've not made a decision to authorize HBRC to create a subsidiary, correct?
Well, the documents at the moment don't expressly allow it, no.
Right, so therefore, my question is, because this is incorporated into the recommendation of the staff to proceed with all of this, are we, by voting to accept the staff recommendation, acceding to these recommendations?
No. No, so the recommendation that you're being asked to pass is that you agree that the transition board of the Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company will be replaced by a permanent board of directors to take effect from 1 July 2015.
Well, except in that memorandum, item 14 says, at some point, HBRC will need to form a specific legal entity to manage the assets of RWSS. The sensible time to do this is before the formation of the permanent board. So if I take this memorandum, it is basically incorporating a set of recommendations you've made in your attachment 2, where you do say that we should create this. Item 11, we consider that establishing a subsidiary, blah, 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 of independent director decide whether the conditions have been met. So now we're contemplating delegating to a subsidiary company that we want to create before July 1st, people unknown to any of us, who would then make a decision that the financial close conditions have been met. And we're doing all of this mechanics.
Yeah,
We're getting into your views again.
Well,
Yes,
I'm asking for a clarification what this says.
Can I provide some clarification before I leave? The recommendation asks you to obviously accept that the permanent board of directors will take effect from the 1st of July. We don't know right at this particular point in time whether or not financial close will have been met or is likely to be met by the 30th of June. So we can't, if you like, we can anticipate or plan for different scenarios. But if, for example, financial close is going to be reached by the 30th of June, then HBRC will go to set up RWLP, the limited limited partnership, as the operating company. So that's why there's nothing specific in here about the setting up of another separate legal entity, but it is an option if financial close is delayed because of, for example, or most likely, any continued action in the regulatory space. So that's why there's no specific recommendation on that, but it is a potential, that's potentially what you're voting for, but we don't know at this stage.
Question?
Yes, sir.
I mean, I don't know whether that was an answer or not to the question as to whether, if we adopt the recommendation, are we in fact acceding to the proposition that there should be, and I think you're saying now there's another subsidiary which is not the limited partnership, it's something else. Are they two different things?
Yes, they are.
So we have another entity here. I'm testing my reading is what I'm doing, Mr. Chairman. You're recommending that we create this other subsidiary. Will this matter ever come back before us? I mean, we had a discussion at the outset of this meeting, frankly, about trust.
Order.
And
Order,
you've
asked your question. You've asked your question. Order.
when do we actually approve, if we wish to, creating this subsidiary?
Well, that would be a matter to go on the agenda, I would have thought. So if the idea here is that you make a decision about whether 1 July 2015 is the date that you want your permanent board in place from, so that everybody has certainty about that, then come closer to the time you will have a bit more information about whether financial close is going to be at 30 June or not. If it is, then there's no issue. You've already decided on your permanent board. You will need to make decisions about who is going to go on that, and there'll be a process to select the council of directors, presumably, to go onto that board. If financial close is not going to happen as at 30 June, then you will need to decide, okay, how are we going to deal with that? We've got a permanent board in place. Who do we want to be making the decision about whether financial close is being achieved? Do we want council of directors involved in that decision? If we've already decided that the permanent board is going to be in place from 1 July, then there will be council of directors on the board at that time. So how are we going to deal with the actual or perceived conflict of interest questions? And at that point, you will need to make a decision about whether you're going to put a subsidiary underneath that has wholly independent directors to make that decision, or whether you're going to deal with it in a different way. So at this point, I believe the only decision that you're being asked to make is whether or not you want to have that permanent board in place as at 1 July 2015.
Last question.
Mr.
So
Chairman.
the references here to
Just
the...
one, sorry, one more question, Councillor Dick.
The references to the concession deed where Councillor Barker originally started, I guess it's in your memorandum, this paragraph 3. Are we actually now a party to this concession deed, or is it just a draft that's sitting there waiting to be?
At this point, it's a draft because it has to be signed by the limited partnership as well, which of course at this point doesn't exist.
All right, so again, my reading therefore is that we have not agreed to delegate our decision about whether the conditions have been met to either HBRC, and certainly not to any subsidiary company which we have not yet decided to create.
On the basis of these documents, and these documents have been out there and will be the basis on which the water users are understanding how the structure is going to work, that would be how it would work. But, as you say, you haven't actually signed them, so you're not bound at this particular point in time to them.
Councillor Dick, thank you. Councillor Dick.
Mr. Chairman, I've been listening and reading. I've got a proposal for 2 resolutions, and I'd like to propose them to you.
Just so you're going to move.
I'm going to move, but it's not what's there. So we'll have to see
Okay, well,
whether we get
before we
seconded.
get there, are there any other questions?
Point of order. I want to be helpful here. We're still in question time.
Absolutely.
But I'm really interested to hear Councillor Dick's resolutions, because it would help form, because if I know what he's intended to foreshadow, it would help form what my thinking is and the other questions I might have. So if he can just
Could I
foreshadow
foreshadow?
them,
Foreshadow. Okay.
so we can
Fair-
see what's
fair enough.
incoming, we can then...
All right. 2 would be agrees that the transition board of the Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company will be replaced by a permanent board of directors to take effect from 1st of July 2015, provided that the financial close decision point has been achieved by that date. Then 3 affirms that the final decision to invest in RWSS, in brackets subject to conditions precedent being met, is the responsibility of Hawke's Bay Regional Council.
Okay. So any other, did that unearth a range of questions, Councillor Barker, or? And if you've got a comment, I'll hear it shortly.
No, that's, he has, it was,
Yeah, you've got a comment, yes, exactly. Any other questions? Are you happy to move that then, Councillor Dick?
Yes, I am.
And someone happy to second that? You're happy to second that? You wish to speak?
Yes. Look, there are too many uncertainties, and the proposed solutions, optional solutions, with all due respect, are, in my mind, very messy. And the other thing that has been uncovered, and thanks to Councillor Barker, because I didn't read that properly, is this issue of who has the mandate to make the final decision on this $230 million project. And clearly that understanding has always been that it is the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and there's just no way that we can abdicate a decision of that magnitude.
Could I endorse the comments of Councillor Dick and say that it would be an absolute dereliction of our duty if we delegated that decision about whether the conditions precedent have been met or not to another entity. This is money for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. It is our responsibility to interrogate the recommendation to assure ourselves that all of the items are correct and accurate and they stack up. We have, for example, one of the conditions precedent is 40 million cubic metres of water to be sold. But that is only a short a metaphor for the underlying maths behind it. We all know that some of the water being sold early is at a discounted rate, so the 40 million cubic metres is going to have to be increased to make sure the metrics beneath it work. Now, we need to assure ourselves that it's not just 40 million cubic metres, that the metrics underneath it add up and in fact it's financially sustainable from the outset. All of these things we have to assure ourselves of, and it is not for anybody else to assure themselves of it, because it's this council's money which it holds on behalf of the ratepayers, no one else's. And it has to be our signature on it, and we have to put our names to it. I'm very clear on that, and I support Councillor Dick on that 100%. So it seems to me that we've got to get the logic of this right, that if the conditions precedent have been met and this council has signed off on it, we're then in a position to make the decision about the board, and with clarity about all of the other things that may flow. There is too many uncertainties here at this stage, and I do think we need to be absolutely clear on what we're doing. And I want to congratulate Councillor Dick for getting straight to the issue of it so quickly and so effectively.
Councillor Beaman.
Thanks, Chair. I will support the resolution as proposed by Councillor Dick also, and I thank him for his pragmatic solution to the problem we're grappling with here. I was really worried about the messiness of the solution as well. I was concerned about this perception of conflict of interest that we might create if we went ahead and appointed councillor directors to the HBRC board. The only real reason that Liz has given us for wanting to proceed with a permanent board for HBRC was to give the current board of directors of HBRC some certainty about their future, and certainly the resolution as proposed would not preclude the recruitment and interview process, so that can proceed in any case. So I will support the resolution.
Thank you. No other speakers? Are you going to begin?
Just on the resolution or the substantive? So we've moved to the resolution.
It's on the resolution, yeah.
Come back to speak on the substantive.
No, no.
Passes. Then I'm going to speak now.
On the resolution.
I'll let you speak.
On the matter at hand, Councillor Graham, will be fine.
You probably don't want to hear what I've got to say. I really do appreciate Councillor Dick's really sensible intervention there. I think it was truly what we needed. Unfortunately, I'm not going to support any of this. I'm going to vote against this paper, and therefore if I have to vote against that sensible resolution, I have to. Because I'm completely sick of the debate, of the conflict of interest debate, all the nonsense, all the legal jargons and nonsense which has come up around this whole thing. And I need to go back a little bit. I know I've only got 5 minutes, but I was a strong supporter of having an investment arm, and always have been, with independent directors. But subsequent events, in my experience over the last year with this particular investment company, have really altered my position on this. And I just want to go on a few things. The Napier Port, which is the largest asset and the only real asset they've got, has, in my view, really excellent governance of its own and doesn't require another governance body. And I'll be really pleased if the port would come here every month and give us a 15 minutes dissertation of where they were, the chair of the port, and I think that would suit my agenda a lot better. In fact, it's my view that HBRC, which is just existing, and I don't have anything personally against them, but just the vehicle, has added no value to that relationship between us and the port, and in fact, the contrary is true. It's really interesting that we didn't deem, this council here, while they all sit around and say, well, how HBRC is so wonderful and marvellous, we didn't deem to have them involved in the commercial discussion or debate around rail, which I would have thought that would have been, if you had a bunch of guys that you really thought were up to speed, you would have that. And also I need to say that, finally, that I have been incredibly unimpressed in the way HBRC and some people of this council have managed the water storage challenge in Central Hawke's Bay. And I think they've done damage to the water storage argument with the public. So I am against having, and I will vote against anything that keeps HBRC in place. As far as I'm concerned, we should scrap them and go back to square one and manage the port as the port's been managed, and any investment comes in front of us, we can get private consultants, as we are indeed doing, to help us make the decisions. So that's my position, and that will remain my position for the next 18 months.
Councillor Belford, then Councillor Scott.
I agree so strongly with Councillor Graham that I'm inclined to walk over there and give him a hug. But because we're on videotape, I'll refrain. But I would, I can't really add much to the points that he has made. I agree with every single one of them, including thanking Councillor Dick for trying to adjust the outcome, because if this resolution passes, which I suppose it will, it's at least a better outcome than the one we started with. But I would add one more point. If we go down this path that is suggested in all of this, we will ultimately be adding yet a third layer of complexity to how we manage important business of Hawke's Bay. We already have problems with the transparency of HBRC, in my judgment. And now we talk about creating yet a third layer, which is supposed to be purely commercial. On the other hand, this is an entity that is supposed to be operating a storage scheme that will meet very stringent environmental standards and protect the catchment that it is going to have a major impact on if the project proceeds. And so the whole gestalt of this, that we will go out and find some commercial directors and perhaps directors who don't actually bring much commercial news to the equation, but certainly there's no contemplation that they would bring any environmental sensitivity to the equation, to manage a third tier down in the structure company superintended by another entity which may or may not function with any transparency, and ultimately it comes back to us. So I'm voting for, I would just like to stop the whole process, get rid of this HBRC entirely, and bring matters back to our table where they belong.
Councillor Scott.
Mr. Chairman, the resolution in its form, which is up on the board there, certainly does not bring total certainty to the directors, and it does lead us with some risk as to how they will continue, or whether they are ready to commit indefinitely to an unknown date. That we don't know, and it's a risk that we have, if we pass this, that we are deciding to take. However, certainly it does satisfy the removal of any possible doubt over perception of interest, while not actually involving us in any unnecessary cost of setting up a subsidiary at this stage. However, I do actually want to focus on the fact that we are not discussing whether HBRC should continue or not. We have made that decision quite some time ago. And this is not the time and place to suddenly backtrack, nor when we refer to the only asset. we forget all the other things that we've placed in front of him, which we've gone through a consultative process and agreed on, such as the development after the Ruataniwha one of the Narora water storage. That's been consulted on through our last long-term plan and has remained on the books through our annual plan. One of the things that really worries me is the lack of understanding of the tax implications around this. So certainly, I wasn't sure whether Councillor Belford said there was a moose. I'm not sure of his accent. Oh, a noose, the thing that goes around your neck. Sorry. But there are certainly, that's one of the things we delved into when we looked at setting out HBRC, was all those tax implications around our various entities and where we could actually maximise benefits to the ratepayers through that. So we're not here to discuss HBRC as a continuing, we're here to discuss when it'll be set up as a permanent board rather than transition board. And we've pushed the date out many times. It is time to give some certainty to that. So I will support although it still leaves questions for our current directors because there is still an uncertainty around financial close.
Thank you. You wish to sum up, Councillor Dick?
Look, I'd just like to say that I don't agree with those councillors who believe that HBRC should be dismantled. They are doing, in my view, a good job in a very difficult and challenging environment. And in any case, they've been tasked, and it's only appropriate that they see through that task. In terms of certainty for directors, well, you know, if perhaps being placed in the position of virtually month-to-month employment is of difficulty to any particular director, then that director could advise that and we could look to replacing that particular person. So I don't see it's a big issue, and hopefully there'll be clarity even next month with the resolution of Board of Inquiry, if that hopefully happens. So by supporting this, I think we're tidying things up. We're avoiding unnecessary complications and manoeuvres in establishing entities that will be either very temporary or not even required at all. And most importantly, in 3, we are making the point very, very strongly that as it has been intended right from word 1, word go, that RWS, whether it goes or not, is a decision of this council.
Thank you. I'll put the motion in. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. Carried.